My name is Jim Friend. I'm the MC for the Intro to Crypto track, so welcome again. We've had some wonderful conversation. It's ironic our last topic really delved into security towards the very end, and that's what our topic is today, security for cryptocurrencies and protecting ourselves against hacks and scams. And we have an expert in that field in the person of Michael Ghen. Michael is a cybersecurity specialist based in Philadelphia since late 2016. His focus has been on blockchain and cryptocurrency networks and cybersecurity. He is an adjunct instructor at St. Joseph's University's Hobbs School of Business and the University of Pennsylvania's Financial Technology Boot Camp. Mike earned a BS in computer engineering from Pennsylvania State University and an MS in strategic analytics from Brandeis University. He was also a cyber and data security fellow at the Drexel University. He's actively building smart contracts and other crypto assets and security solutions. So let's give a big warm welcome to Michael Ghen.
Thanks. Thanks. All right, great. So the title of my talk is cybersecurity, and specifically we're going to focus on protecting you against hacks and scams. So I'm going to do a little introduction about myself, and then I'll go into the scams, the hacks, and then the last thing I want to introduce, which is sort of, I think, the gold standard for security in the space, which are multi-signature safes and what's called social recovery. All right, so a brief little introduction on me. Yes, I studied computer engineering. I studied analytics. I did a cybersecurity fellowship for about a year, looking mostly at the game theory in Bitcoin and security vulnerabilities. And then I've also been mining cryptocurrency since about 2016. I learned about it in 2012. I learned how to do it and just sort of shelved it. 2013 and 2014 wasn't such a great time in crypto. And then today what I do is build smart contracts. So a lot of what I build are sort of virtual safes, virtual locks, things that are computer code that involves locking up money and keeping that safe from just anyone out on the internet. Just because when you build a digital safe in a blockchain, anybody can interact with that safe. So you have to create it in such a way that it is rule bound to the specific protections you want. And then most of what I do is running a decentralized exchange contract and improving it. And this is, if you're familiar with things like Uniswap, this is an exchange. And specifically, I focus on making dollar cost averaging really easy. So in the crypto space, I'm not really selling anything except dollar cost averaging and being responsible in general. So let's talk about keeping your crypto safe. The main thing to say about keeping your crypto safe is self-custody is the way to go. There was, I think, this opinion for a while that these centralized services like Coinbase and Celsius and FTX were safer for a lot of people. And by safer, what I meant is they're protecting you from yourself. So those services I mentioned offer things like recover your password, and all these other sort of things. Two-factor authentication even. I mean, if you think about a centralized financial system giving you two-factor, what is the decentralized equivalent of two-factor authentication? How do you go above just having your phrase written down somewhere? So anyway, it offers you complete control, but also at the same time, you have 100% responsibility. And I think it's safe to say, I used to be on the other side of the fence, but I think it's safe to say that you're actually safer taking responsibility for your own money than trusting it to anybody else. I think at this point it's the case. However, if you are going to keep it yourself, I think there are some things you need to think about in terms of keeping your private keys safe. How do you recover your funds when you're deceased, which I don't think a lot of people think about, but everybody needs to think about it because we could all just walk out of here and get hit by a bus. So, all right, so let's get into the scams piece, right? So, and scams and hacks, there's a lot of overlap, but I'll just talk about some specific scams that I see. The first two you might already be aware of, which is phishing or spear phishing and Ponzi and affinity schemes. Basically with phishing and spear phishing, this is, you receive an inbound message. That's why we use the term spear, right? So spear is like someone's directing a message at you. Maybe your information's been hacked because you use a centralized exchange, and people know that you're someone who uses whatever, Celsius, right? Well, now they can send you targeted message to try to trick you. They know who you are, they know what you might be interested in. So that's what this spear phishing is. Phishing is more broad, the term phishing can be more broad. Spear phishing just is very direct. And spear phishing is really what's happening in the space, because the way that you become known is you either are like me and you're listed on a crypto conference, or your information's been leaked. And so a lot of people are coming after you because they know who you are specifically, and they may even know where you live or can find that. The other thing about the scams are Ponzi and affinity scams. Ponzi and affinity scams are usually like together. Affinity scam, I'll talk with that one because that might be more unfamiliar than Ponzi. Affinity scam refers to a scam that goes through a community, right? And this is usually what happens. You look at it, FTX was basically running a Ponzi scheme, right? We all know that now, no different than Bernie Madoff or Enron. And the affinity that he had was to sports. So he was very targeted to the sports people. Why? Well, it makes a lot of sense when you think about it, what he was doing and who has money and who wants to gamble. So anyway, be aware of affinity schemes. Starbucks baristas, or just baristas in general. It's the communities that I see affinity scams in. I see affinity scams in doctors. Doctors are really smart people. They have a lot of money. Are they the best with finance? Are they the best at detecting whether someone's trying to scam them? No, not really. So be aware of that. Those two roll together. And then the last one, which is actually the saddest, and it's really unfortunate to see some of these cases. I wish it upon nobody, which is what's referred to as pig butchering. This is basically a phishing attack, but it's a phishing attack combined with more or less a romance scheme or some kind of like trust building relationship where just like if you're a pig butcher, you basically are leading pigs to a slaughterhouse. That's what the term pig butchering is. It's when somebody approaches you and they're like, oh, we're making this money in this thing, you should try it, and they convince you to try it, and then they string you along for, it could be months, it could be weeks, and then eventually they pull the veil back and you realize that you wired your entire life savings to what's most likely foreign human trafficking. So stay away from this. The last one about pig butchering is I would just say, like, if you're here, you're probably not going to get pig butchered, but you probably have a relative that could. So it's really on you to talk to people about this pig butchering thing and not to fall, because there's a demographic of people that fall for pig butchering, and it's people who are lonely and isolated. So make sure that it's on you to help prevent it in the space. How to avoid scams. Generally, I think getting a hardware wallet is the best. And it's not going to directly prevent scams from approaching you, but keeping your money in a hardware wallet, the way that you physically access your money when it's in the hardware wallet makes you more aware of what you're doing. And you're a lot less likely, if you're holding, in my opinion, you're holding your money on your ledger, there are more steps that you have to go through. And it's not as easy, I think, to just log into your Coinbase, punch in an address somebody gave you, and send away your life savings. So the hardware wallet helps avoid scams because it forces you to take the thing a little bit more seriously. And also, once you have a hardware wallet, it's very important that you never share your seed phrase. The primary scam I see with people who have hardware wallets that end up falling for it is they don't know what they're doing, and they're like Googling around on the internet. They find some website, and that website sort of tricks them into getting their seed phrase, right? It says something like, oh, you need to do recovery, go get your seed phrase. Once you set up a hardware wallet, it'll tell you you never input your seed phrase in anything. The only ever thing you should ever input that seed phrase in is another hardware wallet, in case you lose your hardware wallet. Next step to avoiding scams is use apps in app stores. So I have an app, Ricochet Exchange, my decentralized exchange. We're in Ledger Live. So if you have a ledger, you don't need to connect your ledger to your browser, or download another middleware. and then figure this out. You can just open up Ledger Live, the same place where you see your portfolio, and within Ledger Live, there's a section called Discover, which is basically their app store, right? So almost all wallets nowadays have some kind of app store. And I really think that using the apps that are in the app store is the primary way to avoid a scam, because those apps are curated, right? I know Ledger Live, and we work together. They looked at my app. In fact, they actually developed some software to make this happen on the device side. So apps that get into that, in those stores, think about like Apple apps. To get an app in the Apple store, there are some hoops you have to jump through. As a result, there's no real garbage there. And then the last thing I think, this is actually, maybe one of the most important ones, is just working with someone when you're doing transactions. Especially if you're new to this, like even if you're transacting at the level that I think people will with self-custody, which is like holding a significant amount of savings in your own custody, you really want to have someone close that knows about how the whole thing is set up, and can, in the event that you disappear, they can take some steps to like recover things. Also having this person there is like, you can bounce ideas. Like, what do you think about me investing in baby dog coin? Like, maybe a good idea, well, how much are you gonna put in? I'm gonna put like 90% of my net worth in there. It's like, all right, well, maybe we should think about, maybe we should have a discussion about why you wanna do that. So it'll clear up, avoid some scams. All right, hacks. So, they all roll in the same pack, right? Scams and hacks and all this stuff happens. I want to talk about centralized finance, like things on the hack side and the centralized finance, and I'll talk more in the decentralized finance. The one thing I think to be really conscious of is it's not just about losing your money on these platforms, it's also about losing your personal information. And I would say the latter is actually a lot more important. Losing your personal information sucks because, especially if it's your address, what are you gonna do? You're gonna move, right? Like, losing your money, at least it's replaceable. You can always go make more money, right? So I think and the exploit I have up here is about Ledger, right? Obviously Ledger's great now, but they did make a mistake very early on, which is they trusted a marketing tool with a lot of their customers' information, including their home addresses, and that entire database got leaked. And people who were on that database still today get like mail from like crypto scams. Like, I'm talking paper mail, like buy this, Hex token or Pulse Chain or whatever. I don't know what shows up, right? Hex definitely shows up, but Pulse Chain, I think it was just a derivative of Hex. In the same way, works the same way. And then also just like, system exploits beyond just losing your personal information, like exchanges get hacked. Like, it's just a thing that happens. They can, try their best to prevent it. Some exchanges have better records than others, but that's an easy way to lose your money, just get hacked. And really in the fallout of FTX, you see what looks like a hack, which is like somebody apparently unauthorized access got in there and took the money. And if you look at almost every exchange failure that's been out there, there is evidence of some hacks. Like Mt. Gox got hacked. That was a huge problem. They try to cover up the loss from the hack or try to make up the difference from the loss of the hack, and the hole just gets bigger. And then the other thing is just sort of a centralized rug pull, right? So it's a hack in the sense that somebody was planning. A rug pull implies planning, right? Somebody made a rug that was attractive for people to stand on, right? And then one day, like the Quadriga founder just disappears. Nobody has access to the crypto. It's presumed lost. And there's a whole history. I have this little timeline here. $40 million here, $20 million there, $70 million. The Bitfinex hackers were recently caught, which is why I have it up here. It's worth noting is, at the time it was $72 million they stole. By the time they caught them, it was worth $3 billion. So there's a lot of people do it, and it's state sponsored too at this point, which is like, the money when a hack like this happens, it doesn't go anywhere good. All right, the other thing is, so decentralized financial side, because there are similar hacks and exploits that don't necessarily involve the breaking and entering kind of hacks that I just previously talked about. So the first ones are like, hacking the signers on a contract, right? So a lot of people, even though it's decentralized, there are still like 5 or 6 people that are authorized to make changes to it, right? So regardless of what people say about like things being permanent on the smart contract side, smart contracts are flexible. So a common exploit is that the people running the contract lose their ability to sign, right? So in that case, it's sort of a system exploit, which is there was this system where like five people who got hacked, if these 5 people got hacked, then they could hack the system. The other one is just sort of the founders like sort of stealing the keys or abusing their admin privileges, right? Those are sort of system exploits as well. The other one is just if a contract has a bug, right? This is probably the most common, which is like somebody's analyzing the system, this contract, and they find that there's some way that they could just pull the money right out, right? So they basically have a bug in their contract that allows some hacker to steal money out of it. There's also with decentralized wallets, you need to be careful about what wallets you're using. Some say they're decentralized, non-custodial. Secretly, they're somehow caching the private keys on another server. There was an exploit where a wallet got, all of its keys were leaked. Or the way the keys are generated is insecure. There's also ways to kind of, what seems like is random is not actually random. And then the last one for system exploits that I have is basically what are called economic exploits. Basically the system was designed in such a way where it could economically be destroyed. So this is sort of like Terra Luna. Terra Luna was more or less, regardless of whether they had bad intentions, the system itself was not ever going to work, right? I compare it to like a corkscrew helicopter, right? People made corkscrew helicopters. They never really flew, and we have helicopters today that work fine that don't use the corkscrew. Terra Luna is in the class of like algorithmic stablecoins that I sort of look at like the corkscrew, which is like people keep trying it, but nobody ever really gets it right. And the people who grow it, once it grows too big, they collapse. And the reason they end up collapsing is usually their Ponzi schemes and their construction. But also there are economic exploits where people will manipulate market prices. So there's a tool called a flash loan, which basically allows anyone to borrow almost as much money as they want. And so long as they use it and then return it right away, then that's fine. They pay a small fee. It's usually like 0.01% of the loan value is what it costs to do this. And using that flash loan mechanism, you can borrow a lot of money, and then you can use that money to manipulate the market. And then based on a manipulated market, you can take advantage of something on another system, right? Now this is straight illegal. Like manipulating markets for anything is pretty much illegal. So, but yeah, that's the economic exploits. And then also just in the the hacks world, like some of these systems are built to be money extracting systems from the very beginning. The architects of it have built it so that they can take money of whoever puts money into the contract. These are also referred like rug pulls, which is basically somebody builds this rug, this scam rug, convinces a bunch of people to put money into it, and then at the last minute, they just pull out the rug, right? So there's a lot of just what are called soft rugs too, which is like regardless of whether the intentions of the team were to do the rug pull and basically pull the funds out, one thing led to another and the team just abandoned the project. And in this case, it's just a rug pull because people just sort of abandoned it. Not really a hack, but it's just something to be aware of as well. As far as the attackers just doing this, one of the key ways they do it is what's called like an infinite mint. It's when someone creates this project with tokens, and then people start trading the tokens on the open market. A market develops, a pool of capital appears with some depth to it, and then the creators of the project just infinitely mint as many tokens as they can or they want, and then in the simultaneous transaction, they just dump it into the pool and take out all of the money that's sitting on the other sides of the trade. So people who think they want to buy this, suddenly, okay, yeah, we'll sell it to you, but we're also going to sell it to everybody, simultaneously making it worthless and simultaneously also extracting any money out of anyone that was involved. So that's a common rug pull as well. The people put in real money and then someone pulls it out. So avoiding hacks and scams, like I always said, like I think hardware wallets and the app stores, I think are where most people should probably start and stay. It's again, just avoiding hacks just in the way that you're gonna take it more seriously when you're working with the hardware wallet. The whole process just feels more serious. And then also the app stores are places where you're unlikely to find anything that can be hacked. it isn't to say that, even the top tier of smart contracts like Aave, Uniswap, it doesn't just because they show up in the App Store doesn't mean they can't be hacked. Nothing can't be hacked. It's just there's always a probability above 0 that something can get hacked, right? And then the other thing is just don't keep funds on exchange, right? One of the main things about hacks and scams is just that if your money's with somebody else, it's almost like it's much easier to get hacked and scammed than it is to sort of have your funds yourself. And then the other thing is just having somebody review an app. If you do want to tread into the territory of apps that are outside of the App Store, that's fine. And honestly, I think most people, once you have used the apps in the App Store, it probably makes sense for you to try to explore some apps outside the App Store because the yields are higher. And with those higher yields comes higher risk. Nonetheless, when you have someone who can look over an app and they've used it, you can show up to our meetup. I run the DeFi Philly meetup in Philadelphia. We meet all the time. And you can ask us, hey, I'm looking at this system. I want to know what it is, like Thorchain or whatever it is. And people can give you experience. So that's probably one of the easiest ways to avoid hacks. Is just like, go with people who have a sort of social proof that they're using it. Like I've been using apps for almost 12 months now, right? Those apps that I've been using for over a year, I feel pretty comfortable with. I understand. Obviously I'm not going to go around and say there's, high returns with no risk like Mr. Bankman-Fried, but it's fine to use some of these systems even though they don't sit in the app. I would just recommend if it's your first time using it, find some experts in your community that can sort of also look at it. The other thing is the last two here are really, really important, especially if you're going to be putting a real lot of money into this, is you need to always be setting up two-factor authentication when accounts allow it. That's everything from your email address to your Verizon wireless thing, but you should almost always be looking, when you're setting stuff up for crypto, you should always be looking for two-factor. If it's not presented to you when you log in, it sometimes is in the settings and you have to turn it on secondary. But most services that are reliable, I'll say it like this, which is if it's not asking you to do two-factor authentication, you might want to double check what it is that you're using that system for. Why would they just skip that? Is it because they're not taking it seriously? Is it because it's not something you're supposed to put a lot of money in? And then the other thing is just separate emails, phone numbers, and devices. So I don't actually have a separate device that I use for crypto, mostly because everything I do is crypto. But if you're like a family and you're trying to protect wealth on a device you store, I would recommend just getting a second device. It also goes back to the whole idea of you're going to treat it more seriously. You're going to sit down there, you're going to open that computer, that separate device that you have. You're going to pull out your hardware wallet so you know that you're doing something that you've got to pay attention to. You can get that set up for under $1,000. You can get a phone, a laptop, that would be fine. And then the phone numbers, depending on how you do it, you can just pay for a second phone. Or if you're pretty good with Google, you could use something like Google Voice. The reason to use separate emails and separate phone numbers is in the event that your information gets leaked. If your information gets leaked and it's your personal email, that's pretty bad. If your email gets leaked and it's just a separate email you set up just for crypto, guess what? Just make a new email, right? If that phone number gets compromised, guess what? Just get another phone number. So yeah, that's all I said on that. So, all right. So the last piece here is this is, I think, especially when you're working in the Ethereum ecosystem and the like. You can do all these things with Bitcoin, I'm sure, and all the other chains that are out there with all the separate coins. But these are, I think, the gold standard for setting up and securing a lot of funds. And I would say it like this: if I was going to be setting up to secure a lot of funds, this is the sort of setup that I'd be looking for. And the first thing involves multi-signature wallets, and that might be a little misnomer because multi-signature systems are usually smart contracts. So it's like a multi-signature contract. And what happens here is you can authorize 3 of 5 people, 5 of 9, even 2 of 2, right? Whatever rules you want to set for who needs to approve a transaction, you can set those rules. The example of this is called Gnosis Safe. It's a tool that I use a lot. I really like it. It's actually the smart contract on Ethereum with the most money locked in it. So it's probably the most popular by amount of money in it. and it's been well tested. It has a great interface. So multi-signature wallets are great. You can achieve the two-factor authentication with a multi-signature wallet. And the way that I do it basically is I have my laptop. That's one signer, right? There's a key on my laptop. My second signer is my phone, and then my third signer, like this phone, and then my third signer is just a hardware wallet, right? So all of the transactions are done with my hardware wallet connected to my computer. I have a separate like software wallet on the computer, that's this other signer. But I'll do things on my hardware wallet, and then they pop up on my phone, and then my phone is the other key, so I can just sign it on my phone. That way, it's really just a 2 of 3 safe, but I own all 3 keys, and all 3 keys are in separate places. So it's a pretty convenient way to do it. But I would recommend setting up a safe, have some rules around who can access it. It's a very easy way to do it. And then the other thing is what's called social recovery. And social recovery is very interesting because it works with a safe. You still put your funds into a multi-signature safe, basically. Well, I shouldn't say multi-signature. You put your funds into a safe. It's a smart contract that has some rules written around it. And the primary rules are that you have what are called guardians. So you can delegate guardianship to any number of other people. And if in the event that you lose your wallet or you lose the private key or for whatever reason happens, that address becomes compromised, people can recover through like a social means. So you just go to your friend and say, hey, I messed up my wallet. I need you to sign this transaction so I can replace my address. And I think you have to go to 2 people, so it's still like multi-signature. You can say like, this device is allowed to do social recovery. My friend is allowed to do social recovery. So these are more advanced tools. I think at a certain point you need to consider, with the hardware wallet, the thing is about that you're keeping your private keys safe. Go to this other side. So the thing about it is you're keeping a private key safe. It's 24 words, which are usually written on a piece of paper, right? Well, what happens, where are you going to keep the piece of paper? You're just going to put it in your safe? Well, what happens if someone breaks in your house and steals your safe, right? I'm telling you, they're looking for this, right? They're looking for 24 words on a piece of paper because at this point, the criminals know what that is. So you have to take extra steps with the seed phrase, like cut it in half, send half of it to mom's house and half of it to my house, right? That's great and all, except for like what happens if mom's house burns down, you lose your phrase, or now you're out, forget about you losing your phrase, now you're out 6 words. So there's all these like rigmarole you have to jump through if you want to secure your seed phrase. But you can do it all without a seed phrase. You can do it all without having a piece of paper. You just have to use like 3 of 5 signatures, 2 of 3 signatures. In the scenario, if you have a 3 of 5 signature safe, it's like the Horcrux in like Harry Potter. Like, what are the odds that like 3 of the 5 will be lost, right? The odds of 1 of the 5 being lost is probably actually not like an insignificant amount. 5 people asked to trust like a secret phrase and keep it safe. 1 is probably going to lose it, right? So, but will 2 lose it? Probably not. So in that scenario, you can set up wallets and never store the private key. As long as you have that wallet, you can sign transactions on the safe. And if you lose your wallet, you have 4 other people. You only need 3 of them. But you have 4 other people that you can go to immediately and say, hey, I need to recover. I need you to like swap out the address on there. But in that case, all those people can shred their private keys, and short of them all being held in like contempt of court, nobody can get into that safe or something. All right, so getting started. I like the get off zero term. You can do this, right? The other thing I have under here, getting started, is get help from friends and family. I definitely think you need to get some help from friends and family. Both of the ways I said, in both scams and hacks, I said you could avoid them by working with friends and family or working with someone, having someone else review what you're doing. But anyway, here's just sort of left like a little bit of tips, which is, first thing I think, make a new email account. Definitely make a new email. Get yourself a hardware wallet. I actually get my hardware wallets through Amazon because I think that Amazon will do a better job protecting my information than Ledger will. And you can just buy direct from Ledger on Amazon. Also, the Ledger devices have an authentication mechanism, so the first thing you do when you get a device is it runs through this authentication system that Ledger provides to prove the authenticity of the device. And then also Password Manager. really think you should set up a password manager if you're going to be like having multiple exchanges. The other thing about a password manager is it's much easier to hand down the password to a password manager than it is to hand down a password to the 10 crypto things that you have, right? So if all you have to do is like, have a little, in case anything happens to me, here's my password to LastPass or 1Password, that's a lot easier. Then they get in there, and then from there, everything is available, as opposed to like, oh, we can't get into this system, or we didn't even know he had this system, right? Like nobody knew that that was even there. Okay, so once you have the email, hardware wallet, password manager, then I would recommend trying apps in the App Store. These will be things like DEXs, like 1inch and Uniswap. Aave will also probably be in those app stores as well. But the app stores is like your safe environment to work in. After a while, I think you want to consider whether a dedicated device and a dedicated phone is worth it. It is really inconvenient when your phone number ends up on one of these hacks, because the amount of, you think you get spam messages now, they're going to get more of them and they're going to be weirder. And so it is not a bad idea to like be mindful of where you're putting your personal phone number when you're in the crypto space. Ideally, you don't have to put it anywhere ever, which would be great, but that's not the world we live in right now. And then the last step would be just consider multi-signature safes, consider social recovery, especially if you're going to be getting into serious amounts of money. Depending on what chain you're working on or what asset you want to have, the multi-signature safes and social recoveries will be done differently. But that's it. So with that, thanks. If you have any questions, you can email me. I'm pretty easily accessible because I run the DeFi Philly meetup in Philly. We meet like every Tuesday and a couple times a month to do talks. So thank you. I'm happy to speak today, and I hope you guys enjoyed it.
If anybody has any questions for Mike, I'm going to go ahead and walk the mic around so that we can.
Sure. And this may be more on the edge of the scope of what you've talked about, and as it relates to the TCP layer level, which is just a little bit outside of this, but through which bits and bytes flow. When somebody's making a transaction using crypto, do you know if those bits and bytes are marked as, hey, this is a Bitcoin, this is a crypto transaction? And I'm just thinking from your slide about the state-sponsored or whatever, and let's say somebody wants to say, well, we want to make sure that this crypto stuff looks in state, it's not stable, it's not guaranteed, so they can kind of drop packets, stuff doesn't pass through.
Yeah, that's a great question. So first of all, like a very common thing to know is like, let's say you have a wallet address and you're like, oh, nobody knows this wallet address. And then one day you're like, how much do I have in my wallet? And so you type it into the block explorer and you hit go and you hit that website that has your address. Well, now they don't, what was sent back and forth, that nobody sees that because that's HTTPS. So they can't like look at what the payload is and say like, oh, this is crypto. What they can look at is where you're going, right? So that's sent over the header that's communicated to people who can see it. And so they know that you're hitting these sites. The solution for that is like a VPN, which then your internet service provider just will see that you're using a VPN. A lot of people recommend just setting up whole house VPNs, which are things you can do. I actually don't really need that level of security. Like I just punch my addresses in and let it go. Like my ISP knows everything I do. When it comes to like mining activity and other things, ISPs can see that, and it's usually just because of the URL. It's not because they're like inspecting what's inside of it. Like if I turn on my Monero miner at my house, my internet service provider, unless I put it through a VPN, is going to see that I'm mining on XMR pool, right? And they're like, well, what's this guy doing with XMR pool? Well, there's only one thing you would do, right? Especially it looks like that. So they can see that kind of stuff. And that would fall into like traffic analysis. Like they don't know what's in the information they're getting. They just know where it's going to and from and when it was sent. So, and that's often enough information to figure stuff out. As far as like just censoring these networks in general, not really possible. I mean, look at China trying to just censor like Netflix or whatever. Like everybody in China is getting American stuff one way or another through VPNs. So, great question. Yeah.
Yeah. I think we've heard a couple of times throughout the conference this analogy that you used that DeFi is like the Wild West. And I'm wondering like, is it ever not going to be the Wild West? Is it something that we're moving away from, or are we moving into it and you just got to be able to use these technologies that you're talking about?
Yeah, well, I mean, like, what happened? When do we move out of the Wild Wild West phase, and what phase is next? I mean, we are moving out of the Wild Wild West phase in the sense that, like, you can't just, like, like you used to be able to just log on to Tornado Cash and launder money, like no big deal, right? So we're past that. If you do that, you're going to have people show up at your house and be like, what are you doing? So basically what's next? I mean, I think what's next is, like, as cynical as it sounds, like the gangster phase, which is like where we are with banking, the bankster phase, which is like these people have kind of shaped the system in such a way to give them these advantages. With the way regulations and stuff is going, it looks like crypto is gonna just go into the gangsters like phase where, you have people who are basically like, the system is set up to give them this like advantage. Is it criminal? Maybe. Can you prove that it's bad? Possibly. As far as like DeFi goes though, like it'll basically be where do you get it? Like DeFi, in my opinion, like Wild Wild West is not really, I think, a good, at this point, not a good criteria. It's more of like a garden where it's like there is a lot of good stuff here and it's growing and it's doing well. And if you just, stay in this garden, it'll grow around you and you'll grow with it. But yeah, I mean, with respect to like regulations and the way that it's sort of going, to me, it's pretty like gangster, like looks like kind of organized efforts to sort of shut it down, or conflicts of interest that are not clear and murky, people doing favors, and the FTX thing, I think, just shows it, right? You have accounting firms that are not actually doing their jobs. You have regulators that are not regulating. It's not like they didn't know what was going on at FTX, right? People reported this to the federal government. The federal government just was too slow. So anyway, yeah, maybe Wild Wild West phase. When will it go into a phase that it's useful for you and everyone here? It's there right now, so it's definitely ready for people. Is it the Wild Wild West? Like, you don't need to go to those parts of it. You don't need to go to Hamburger Swap and put in hot dog coin, right? Like that was always like Wild Wild West stuff. And that'll still happen, right? Just in the same way that you can like put your money into like the the lottery, or put your money over here, and you'll always have that. But yeah, follow up. Go ahead.
What you're talking about is like with Bitcoin and Ethereum, the scams that you're talking about can run no matter what kind of stuff you're investing in. And so I guess what I'm wondering is like, is there any reason that anyone needs to right now get into a space that is full of people who are going to try to take all your money, other than the possibility of speculating on a really quick profit?
Yeah, so like first of all, I mostly deal with stable coins, and I consider like stablecoin maximalism, yield farming, and all that. So like, yeah, when is it going to be useful? When are you going to be able to get in and avoid the scams? It's useful because there's a certain feeling that you have and freedom that it affords you to hold all of your money and not have to go ask anyone. More or less, people are trying to convince you to bring your crypto to them if you need to get money, because they'll make a fee on it, right? So I definitely think that if you just go like cold turkey, like my checking account at the beginning of the month has what I need for that month. Everything else is in stable coins doing stablecoin things. Beating inflation is what it's doing, but also doing immense amount of risk, right? There's a lot of risk in that. But net, it works out a lot better than if I'm just sitting in Chase or whatever with my money. Or the stock market. I mean, people are like, well, why don't you invest in the stock market? Is it just because you've gotten accustomed to this like risk appetite and market movement or volatility? And the answer is no. I don't invest in the stock market because I think it's a scam. I think it's a sham. And I think everyone's going to get their money like sucked out from under them somehow. I just don't trust it. It's what it boils down to. So, and then that's another thing is the trust in the system. Like, sure, we trust that this exchange has the money that it says, like Coinbase or whatever, but we don't really know. So using the decentralized financial system, you can just look at it. Like, I use a yield aggregating product. And it's like, well, yield aggregating means they're going to take my money and put it in something else, which is what SBF at FTX was doing, more or less, right? He took our money and put it in something else. It was like, whatever he put it in. So, but you can look on DeFi and I can see, oh, here's what they're doing. What they're doing is they're putting it in Curve, and then they're putting it from Curve into Convex. And Curve and Convex have been live for multiple years now, and there's a lot of people using it. Presumably, there's a lot of money sitting there. It would get hacked if it did get hacked. And then also, I was previously doing that, but the reason I worked with yield aggregators is it automates it. So I was like doing it manually. So anyway, I think there are a lot of good things, and it's like ready to be used. There are reasons to get out of the financial system beyond the returns that you get, right? So even though crypto returns can be more volatile, there's benefits to having your own money. There's benefits to not worrying about, is this company doing X or Y? Or just the idea of that you have to go to this like financial casino, which is, maybe it's not in a gangster phase. Traditional finance is casino phase, where it's just like fantasy land, and the odds are not in your favor. The casino always wins. So you can just avoid all that and just hold your money by yourself. If you want to hold dollars, you can hold digital dollars for like DAI, and then you can earn interest on it and beat inflation. Like, you can do all that right now, and obviously you have to take risk, but it's a different kind of risk. Like, it's not trust in a person, it's trust in a technological system. And we're pretty good, like humans are pretty good at building technologies. Like, look at the spaceship, like we just sent people to the moon safely and brought them back, right? Maybe some people debate that, but like, you get the idea. We're pretty good at this, so the systems are pretty robust, they're very useful, and as long as you're doing some of the things I'm saying here, then it doesn't have to be the Wild Wild West. It can just be a place that you sit and earn a yield on your stable coins that's just a little bit higher than inflation. And just the fact that you're doing that is going to outperform all these people, right? Like, the stock market is a sham. Like, we've been saying that, but we all just keep stuffing our money that we get from the government into it. And then when it goes down 30%, we're all like, oh no, like what happened? So you can avoid all that if you just like, pick somewhere else to save your money. So.
Thanks, Mike.
Oh, hold on a second. What?
Oh, I'm sorry. Does somebody else have a question?
Go ahead.
I just wanted to tack on to that. That was great commentary. But the way I see it with DeFi is, yes, I don't necessarily like the Wild Wild West phraseology. But nonetheless, yeah, it's kind of like, it's a bit like a metaphor. I see it like kind of like walking through a minefield, in these places in the world where there's still these mines from, wars and stuff from years ago. Kind of a bit like that. But once you get good at knowing what the minefield is, I'm like super comfortable walking through the minefield every day. And with anything where there's high risk, there's all kinds of examples outside of crypto, like anything else in life and business. Yeah. Wherever there's a lot of risk, there's also a lot of opportunity. So those who are willing to venture in are willing to extract, take advantage of that opportunity.
That's right.
Until more people come in and maybe it's less Wild Wild West, if you will, maybe the opportunity is going to go down a little bit. So, but I also think at DeFi is like, something people don't mention is like, if you play around with it long enough, it's actually fun. It's like, wow, you actually get to play with money. You could never really play with money before. And you're like, this is super cool. You find out, wow, there's this thing over here I can do. What can I do? Okay, I can take this out of here and go put it over here and do all these cool things. It's just, I think there's a huge fun element to it, is what I've experienced.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think, I have definitely more fun with my investments now than when they were in the stock market. So, did you want to go next? Yeah.
Hi. What's your main business, and are you a consultant? Could you help people get off square one?
Yeah, I mean, I can do technical support. That's pretty much my business with respect to helping people. But I run a decentralized exchange, and I build smart contracts. Some of what I do is go to hackathons to compete. I'm like, there's recently an international hackathon. I was like top 5% of builders. So I run a decentralized exchange that takes a fee and has a token and has token economics, and that works well. It's dollar cost averaging is where I focus on, a little different from other exchanges that are just like trading exchanges. But yeah, those are like my businesses. And then I also run the meetup in Philadelphia, and we meet up every week, and then we do 2 talks a month. So
yeah, well, I'm not quite a neophyte, but almost. And all these questions are coming up in my head like, I'm not as smart as I thought I was, So I'm looking for a consultant that I could bang off of and say, does this make sense?
Yeah, I mean, basically what I do is like, I'll do an initial consultation for 3 hours for $500 and then $75 an hour after that with whatever you need. But it's just technical support. Like, can't really do investment advice. Like, tell you what I'm using and why I use it and technically speaking why it works. But yeah, I mean, I don't really do like investment decisions, but I do tech support. So if you have any, if there's needs for that, you can,
Sounds good.
yeah,
Thank
you can email me.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Kind of just off of the questions that just kind of happened, that's kind of part of this whole thing, is their Catholic stewardship to those that don't know yet. It's kind of part of our duty to bring them into the fold a little bit, and you don't necessarily have to be the white knight guardian protecting their life savings and your own, but there is something to be said for those that know should teach, and you know, those that don't know should learn. But I think that kind of leads into my question, which is really simple though. Your Ricochet platform that you created on Ledger Live, I have a Ledger, I'm gonna definitely check that out. Is that, you can purchase directly through that and it would just go right to your Ledger, and you're really avoiding all of these other exchanges, be them safe or not?
Yeah, so the difference between Ricochet Exchange and say Coinbase or FTX is that Ricochet Exchange happens using smart contracts, so the funds are never held with anyone. And the smart contract is written in such a way that, one, my Ricochet Exchange contracts actually don't hold money for a long period of time because it's dollar cost averaging. So every 2 hours, all the money in the contract is swapped and distributed, right? So you don't have to worry about the contracts that I wrote going down. However, you do need to use what are called wrapped tokens, and you do have to work on the Polygon network. And there are compromises you make there. One compromise you make is assets that sit on Ethereum are bridged to Polygon usually. So if you're buying ETH or wrapped Bitcoin or any other thing, you're not getting like the underlying. And there's risk there that like, you know, the funds that are locked in other contracts go under, right? So, and that's a risk that you have when working on Polygon with non-Polygon native assets. So like Polygon has a token called Matic, and Matic on Polygon is a native asset, right? It's like treated like Ethereum is on the Ethereum network. That is an asset that if you're holding that, there's very little likely that anything can go wrong in terms of this bridging infrastructure, right? So that, anyway, the bridging thing is one thing to know about. So if you're using USDC or ETH or wrapped Bitcoin on Polygon, it's actually already a wrapped version of the underlying. Then what you have to do is, in order to work with our exchange, you actually have to what's called like upgrade, or really it's like wrapping, which is you wrap your tokens one more time and turn them into what the team at Superfluid, which is another project that makes payments and does payment technology that we use to do our dollar cost averaging. That is another wrapping. So you have to trust the Superfluid team wrote contracts that are safe. That is where your funds will ultimately be stored. But really, you're taking on two smart contracts. You have the bridging, and then you have the Superfluid smart contracts. Superfluid's a team that, and obviously those contracts are written in a way where we can't just like take your money, right? Superfluid, the team, has no path to take your money out of these contracts. So just like I have no path to take your money out of the Ricochet Exchange contracts. So with respect to using the Ledger, first of all, it's just a website, so you can go to our web app too. So you can use it for app.ricochet.exchange. Ledger just loads it up embedded, and then what really happens is there's actually software that is on the Ledger device that decodes the transactions from Ricochet. So like when you use the Ledger, it'll say like start stream. It'll tell you your stream rate, like dollars per month, right? So when you're using it in the Ledger, your funds are yours. They're just wrapped in two different smart contracts, but they're still your funds. And then as far as what contracts do they sit in, they don't sit in the Ricochet Exchange contracts for more than 2 hours. So if you're streaming at like, let's say you're streaming at like $100 a month, or your dollar cost averaging $100 a month, $50 in the ETH, $50 in a Bitcoin, whatever 2 hours is with that rate of $100 a month is all that ever sits in the contracts that I've written. So, and that's where most of the risk comes from, is what contracts are you putting your funds into, right? So, and that can be a really complicated answer, especially when you're thinking of like bridging and all this stuff. So
that's a good tool. I'm going to check it out.
Yeah, it's on the Polygon network. You can try it. We give out our token as a loyalty point. So there's a token, it's worth something, and you can get it by dollar cost averaging. Also, we benchmarked the dollar cost averaging. There's one other decentralized exchange that does it called Mean Finance. We offer like a yield-bearing version where you can earn yield while you're dollar cost averaging. Obviously, there's a layer of risk there, but but it outperforms the other dollar cost averaging because there's yield in it. So it's something to try too. It'll be better than dollar cost averaging it almost anywhere else.
Michael, I'm going to ask the last question. So let's say there's a pastor or a Catholic nonprofit or a diocese that decides we want to hold a little bit of Bitcoin on the balance sheet, kind of like a Michael Saylor kind of thing, just to see, because we believe in the long-term value proposition of Bitcoin. How does an institution manage the security when you know leadership is going to change?
Yeah.
How would you advise someone on that?
The technical way would be multi-signature. Like if you're any organization, I think a multi-signature is a must, because you need to have multiple people who can, act. And you need it, really the way to say it is you need it so that one person can't act, right? Multiple people have to be involved. So depending on what asset, let's say Bitcoin, you have to find a way to set up a multi-signature wallet with Bitcoin. There are actually companies, like the one escapes me right now, just because I don't do much with Bitcoin these days. Casa, yes, thank you, Kirk. Right, so, and they have like a service where they are one of the signers. I don't know exactly how it works out, but basically they're a company that focuses specifically on setting up these setups for people. But just at a basic level, everyone's probably gonna need to get a hardware wallet, right? Everyone wants to be, you don't wanna just add your mobile phone or something. Everyone should learn how to use a hardware wallet. And even in a simple sense, if it's not gonna be a ton of money and you're okay with just having like a hardware wallet in a drawer that maybe stores a little bit of Bitcoin on it, I don't think that that's a bad setup either. But like if you're gonna be putting like Michael Saylor balance sheet level relative to your organization, then yeah, multi-signature is definitely the way to go. So, and I would recommend, if you're a business, work with a company like Casa. I don't know what the equivalent would be for some of these other assets. Maybe Casa, I don't know if they're Bitcoin only, but I would definitely point people towards something like that. So I also can't help with that. That's too much money for me to want to deal with, and too much organizational stuff. Families and friends, like that's where I sort of operate. So,
Michael, thank you so much for your presentation today. Big round of applause for Michael Ghen.
Thank you. Thank you.